If you're managing complex vascular disease, especially in patients dealing with the severe consequences of diabetes, the stakes just could not be higher.
Hmm.
We're talking about chronic limb-threatening ischemia, or CLTI, and that absolute nightmare of diabetic foot ulcers.
Yeah, these are the conditions that cause those devastating non-healing wounds and, ultimately far too many major amputations.
It's such a critical moment in medicine right
It
now.
really is. For
What?
the clinician, the central challenge isn't just if they can push blood past a blockage, it's,
Mhm.
it's where to direct that flow.
Right.
When you're looking at these heavily diseased, often calcified arteries below the knee and into the foot, what vessel do you actually prioritize? How do you ensure the wound, the site of tissue, death, is going to heal? That choice is life-changing.
And that is the sharp focus of today's deep dive. We were given a fascinating narrative review that synthesizes findings from 14 major studies.
Going back over the last 35 years, some as far back as 1990.
So our mission is to take that complex material and just distill the evidence. We're comparing two absolutely critical strategies used to guide revascularization.
That's right, the traditional anatomical roadmap, which we call the angiosome concept, and then its newer, more flexible counterpart, the Woundosome concept.
We're really going to give you the navigational tools that vascular specialists are using today.
We are. The angiosome gives you this structured, predefined map. It's all about direct flow. But the Woundosome, it shifts the entire calculation.
How so?
It focuses on real-time, functional perfusion, based on what the wound specifically needs.
Yeah.
We'll show you exactly why you can't just use one or the other anymore, and how integrating them is the key to better outcomes and, most importantly, saving limbs.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundation. For anyone unfamiliar, can you define the angiosome concept?
Sure. So this model was introduced by Taylor and his colleagues, and it divides the body into these three-dimensional blocks of tissue.
Okay.
Each of these blocks is consistently perfused by one specific source artery.
It sounds very structured, almost like an anatomical map.
It's an elegant, structured, repeatable framework. That's why it was so quickly adopted in vascular medicine and plastic surgery, too. The rationale is just really compelling.
Meaning, if you have a wound in a specific spot.
Exactly. Say, the lateral aspect of the foot, you target the vessel that's defined as the leading source artery for that specific area.
And that's what's called direct revascularization, or DORAR. You're essentially building a brand new, straight highway for blood flow right to the target tissue.
Precisely. You restore what they call inline blood flow. And that, in theory, maximizes the delivery of oxygen and nutrients straight to the starving tissue.
So it maximizes the chance of healing.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And for a long time, the evidence, especially from retrospective studies, really supported this. It showed that angiosome-guided DR improved wound healing and cut down on major amputations.
Especially for endovascular treatments, right?
Yes, particularly for endovascular, which is much less invasive than open surgery. And the review confirmed this, noting that DR was linked to, significantly higher healing rates and shorter healing times in diabetic patients compared to indirect revascularization.
So DR is the gold standard when it's possible.
It is the gold standard, but hold on. If that anatomical map were truly foolproof, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. What did this study show was the first major crack in that concept?
That brings us to the big limitation you highlighted. The angiosome model, because it's purely anatomical, it doesn't fully account for the incredible variability and adaptability of our vascular system.
And what does it ignore specifically?
Collateral circulation.
And that's where things get really interesting and complex. Collateral circulation refers to those smaller interconnected side roads that develop naturally to bypass blockages in the main arteries.
So the angiosome map is assuming the main highway is the only way to get there.
Exactly. But if a patient has a robust collateral network, and this can be genetic or it can develop over time because of chronic blockages, sometimes restoring flow to an adjacent artery can work just as well.
So you're using that collateral network to feed the wound indirectly.
Right. And you can get comparable outcomes to DR.
So the map might show the main road is closed, but if the side streets are wide and clear, you can still get your supplies where they need to go.
Perfect analogy. But the catch is, how do you know if those side streets are clear? The angiosome concept itself, it offers no mechanism to assess that functional capacity.
That's a huge blind spot.
It's the major limitation. Clinicians would sometimes bypass a difficult direct revascularization target, only to find out the collateral network wasn't good enough to pick up the slack.
And that failure of anatomical rigidity brings us right to this newer idea, the Woundosome concept. You mentioned it was proposed by Patron et al., and it really does sound like an attempt to modernize vascular strategy.
That's a perfect way to put it. The Angiosome gives you the map of where vessels should be. The woundus concept is about defining the territory that the wound actually needs to survive and heal.
It throws out the strict boundaries.
When necessary, yes. It shifts the core focus from the territory to the need.
So how does the Woundosome define that need? What replaces the rigid map?
It emphasizes individualized perfusion targeting. It's based on 3 essential functional factors. First, you look at anatomic variations. How the vessels in this specific patient deviate from the textbook.
Right.
Second, and this is the most critical part, you assess the presence and extent of collateral circulation. And third, you consider the specific characteristics of the wound itself.
Ah, so instead of saying, this toe is supplied by the anterior tibial artery, so we must fix the anterior tibial artery, you're saying.
You're saying this wound needs blood. Let's follow the angiogram and see which artery or which network of arteries is best positioned to feed the actual wound tissue, even if it's an indirect route.
The focus shifts to the arteries directly feeding the wound.
Yes, even if they're tiny vessels, because they're fundamentally more critical for tissue repair than, trying to force open a heavily calcified primary artery just because it's in the textbook.
I can see the immediate practical value, especially in complex cases. If the ideal target for DR is just too diseased or completely blocked, the angiosome concept sort of forces you toward a dead end.
It does. The Woundosome gives the clinician the flexibility to look elsewhere.
Right.
The key takeaway is that it supports the idea that restoring blood flow via an adjacent vessel by leveraging a robust collateral network like the foot arch can absolutely achieve satisfactory outcomes. It validates indirect revascularization when it's needed.
So it's about meeting the real perfusion requirement of the wound, not just sticking to a diagram.
Exactly. It's a paradigm shift from a theoretical map to a functional assessment. And I think the best way to grasp this is to look at the clinical cases in the review.
Okay, let's do that. So if we compare the two, angiosome is anatomical mapping. Woundosome is more like angiographic assessment, focusing on actual perfusion needs.
And the weakness of the angiosome is ignoring collaterals. The weakness of the Woundosome is that it needs really good imaging and better standardization.
Right. Let's make it tangible with the cases. Tell us about a clear success for the rigid angiosome concept first.
Okay, this was a case where direct revascularization was the perfect choice. It was a 66-year-old male, diabetic, with gangrene in his first and second toes.
And the angiogram?
It showed a really challenging situation. Occlusions of both the posterior and anterior tibial arteries.
Wow.
But the clinical team was strict. The wound was clearly in the territory of the anterior tibial artery. So the intervention focused on endovascular recanalization and angioplasty of the occluded distal anterior tibial artery.
They spent the effort to open that direct path. They insisted on opening that main highway.
They did. And by restoring that inline flow directly to the forefoot, they followed the angiosome concept perfectly.
And the outcome?
Complete wound healing, achieved in a relatively swift 2 months. It just shows the undeniable benefit of restoring that direct, unimpeded flow when it's technically possible.
Okay, now let's pivot. Let's talk about a situation where that direct highway was just impossible to fix. This is where the Woundosome approach shines.
Right. Case 2, a 73-year-old patient.
And the wound.
A really severe one. A non-healing ulcer right down to the exposed bone at the first metatarsal head. Clinically, this is incredibly complex, and the angiogram showed the primary vessel for that area, the distal dorsalis pedis artery, was completely occluded, maybe unusable.
So the direct path was out. What did the Woundosome approach let them see?
It let them look past the blockage and functionally assess the rest of the foot. They saw a relatively healthy foot arch, which is a major collateral pathway connecting the front and back circulations.
So they chose a different target.
A completely different target. Balloon angioplasty of the common plantar artery, that's a primary posterior circulation vessel.
Wait a second. They fixed a vessel in the heel area to heal a severe wound on the top of the foot. That's a huge anatomical redirection.
It is. And that is the power of the functional focus. This intervention restored flow indirectly to the wound. Not by the main anterior highway, but by using the foot arch as that robust collateral network.
And the outcome?
Complete healing in 2 months. It just fundamentally shows that you can prioritize flow through the collateral network to feed the Woundosome directly.
That's a powerful example. And there was a third case that really reinforces this functional priority.
Yes. Case 3. This was a 68-year-old non-diabetic patient with toe gangrene. The angiogram showed the peroneal artery as the single runoff vessel.
Meaning severely limited blood supply to begin with, a very challenging baseline.
Right. And the team faced that classic dilemma. Do you try to open the difficult, maybe heavily diseased anterior tibial artery, or do you work with what little you have left?
They chose to work with what they had.
They chose function over pure anatomy. The intervention was angioplasty of only the peroneal artery.
Right.
Because they saw a good-sized anterior lateral malleolar artery, a known collateral branching from the peroneal, that established brisk flow to the forefoot. They just decided the risk-reward for opening the other artery wasn't there.
So they chose the available, viable side road, even though it was technically the wrong main artery, according to the map.
And the post-intervention angiogram confirmed their choice. Satisfactory flow was established to the woundosome, supplied via that collateral in the foot arch.
And healing.
Complete healing. Achieved in just 45 days. It just reinforces that core message. Flow to the woundosome, even if it's indirect, is what's critical.
These cases really illustrate that the map is a great guide, but when the roads are blocked, you absolutely need to be smart and functional about rerouting the traffic.
Exactly. And this need for functional assessment leads us to a crucial diagnostic challenge, especially with diabetic patients.
Right. For decades, the standard metric was the ankle brachial index, the ABI.
But in diabetic patients, medial arterial calcification is incredibly common.
And that calcification leads to falsely elevated ABI values. Can you just briefly explain why that happens?
Sure. The ABI works by compressing the artery in the ankle to get a pressure reading. But when the artery wall is heavily calcified, it becomes rigid. It's incompressible.
So the cuff can't collapse it.
You can squeeze all you want, the vessel won't collapse.
Right.
So you get this artificially high-pressure reading that tells the clinician the flow is fine, when in reality, the tissue downstream could be starving. The metric lies.
So relying on anatomy or a false ABI is just not enough. We need objective perfusion metrics to verify that the revascularization actually worked.
We do. And that need is driving the adoption of some key tools. Two really stand out in the review. The first is transcutaneous oxygen pressure, or TCPO2.
And this is so valuable because it's independent of calcification.
Right. It doesn't rely on compression. It measures the oxygen available right there in the skin. It's a direct reflection of microcirculatory function.
And a powerful predictor of healing.
A very powerful predictor. The sources consistently cite that values above 30 to 40 mmHg are often required and predictive of wound healing.
And the second tool is a bit more practical. It's ultrasound-based, right?
That would be the pedal acceleration time, or PAT. This is an easily applicable measurement using duplex ultrasound. It can be done right in the office. It measures how quickly blood flow accelerates in the pedal arteries.
So a slow time means sluggish flow, and a fast time means restored flow.
Exactly. A PAT value of less than 225 milliseconds has been consistently associated with improved outcomes, and many recent studies suggest its predictive value is comparable to TCPO2.
These sound like indispensable tools, especially for validating a successful Woundosome intervention. But if they're so promising, why aren't they fully integrated into guidelines yet?
That's the persistent gap the review points out. Despite the functional data these tools provide, there are still no universally accepted standardized thresholds.
So one center might define success differently than another?
Right. If one uses 30 mmHg TCPO2 and another uses 40, we lack that critical consensus on the cutoff points, and that heterogeneity limits broad application and research.
Okay, so zooming out to the big picture, what does this all mean for the clinician today? Are the angiosome and woundosome concepts fighting for dominance?
No, not at all. The firm overarching conclusion is that they are complementary, not contradictory.
Okay.
The angiosome provides the structured anatomical roadmap. It's your default setting. The woundosome provides the necessary functional flexibility and optimization, especially in those patients with complex, severe, multi-level disease.
So the functional priority ultimately trumps the anatomical rigidity.
Absolutely. The central finding supported by the current evidence is the rationale of enhancing blood flow in the wound territory, regardless of the leading inflow artery or the direction of the inflow.
Whether you open a new, direct path or maximize flow through the side roads.
Exactly. The goal is the same. Satisfy the wound's functional perfusion requirements.
This definitely feels like a vascular intervention is moving beyond a textbook approach toward truly individualized treatment. But you mentioned the research still has some methodological gaps.
Yeah, and it's important context for the listener. The review noted that most of the supporting studies were retrospective, single-center, and critically, had really heterogeneous definitions of wound healing and severity.
Which means we're often comparing apples to oranges when we look at success rates across different hospitals.
That's right. And many studies failed to consistently report on the specific quality or function of collateral circulation, which is the entire core of the Woundosome concept.
So the future direction is clear. We just need better data collection.
We do. Future studies have to prospectively validate Woundosome-guided strategies.
Yeah.
And, critically, they have to integrate those standardized perfusion tools like TCPO2 and PAPR. We need to establish reproducible, clinically actionable cutoff points so that success is defined the same way everywhere.
This has been incredibly insightful. What you've learned today is that cutting-edge vascular intervention is moving beyond rigid anatomical maps toward individualized functional targeting. The mission is simple. Get oxygen and nutrients to the injury site. You can blast a new highway with direct revascularization, or you can maximize the smaller side roads with indirect revascularization. Both roads, if they're functional, lead to healing.
And that functional goal leads us to an important final thought for you to consider. While restoring large vessel blood flow is crucial, remember that in patients with advanced diabetes, microangiopathy, the disease of the tiny vessels, and neuropathy may limit the benefit of even a technically perfect revascularization.
So the pipes feeding the tissue are still fundamentally unhealthy.
That's right. And this raises an important question that clinicians are grappling with today. To what extent should surgeons prioritize treating the microcirculation dysfunction in diabetic patients before, or perhaps instead of focusing solely on the macrovessel restoration?
A deeply compelling question. It forces us to look not just at the map, but at the entire biological system. That's it for this deep dive.